Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tom Carpenter with CWNP, and I'm excited to have you here for our June 2019 webinar. This is a wireless security lab webinar. We did one of these a couple of years ago, but we've got a new version of CWSP coming up right around the corner. CWSP 206 will launch on September the 1st of this year. And I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about how you can set up a home lab very inexpensively, free from the perspective of the software that you need, and some hardware might have to be acquired in order to implement a full-scale lab that you can actually test some enterprise level configurations for security. But we want to talk about what our options are in building a lab like this. And we'll talk about why we would want a lab in the first place as well. Now, as usual, you can find us on Twitter at CWNP and at CarpenterTom. And you can follow us there, find out about the latest news and so forth. You can also visit CWNP.com and go to certifications and choose CWSP, because the objectives for CWSP 206, the new version that's coming out, are already there. So you can actually look at those objectives and see what's new and what's different. The biggest thing, of course, is we're covering WPA 3 in the exam now. That wasn't in the previous version because it didn't exist. And we're also covering some more penetration testing types of things. So those are the biggest changes coming in the new version of CWSP. Take a look at the objectives there at the website, cwnp.com, certifications, CWSP, and you can see those objectives and download them in PDF format. Okay, so today what we're going to do is start off by talking about why you might want a lab in the first place. And then we'll get into the different components of the lab and what you're going to need to actually build a little test environment where you can play with all things wireless security. Now, keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded. It will be archived on CWNP TV. Interestingly, just yesterday, I was thinking about the fact that June this month is my 7-year anniversary at CWNP. I joined in 2012. And so I started digging what's happened over the last 7 years. And I took a look at CWNP TV, the YouTube channel, and there have been 195 videos posted since the time that I joined. So this will be 196 when it goes live, and then tomorrow's news desk will be 197. So we're getting close to the 200 mark for videos on the channel. Yeah, that's a lot of time talking and recording, but it's been a lot of fun, and I've certainly enjoyed the journey myself. So if you're interested in all things wireless, all of our webinars going all the way back to some in 2012, but I think we started them on a consistent basis in either 2013 or 14. So they're all archived up there, all kinds of specific topics about wireless that you can dive into in those webinars, as well as well over 50 episodes of the Wireless LAN News Desk with lots of good information in those as well. So you make sure you check those out. And finally, as we get into the topic of today and try to keep this down around 30 minutes like we normally do, make sure you check out Wi-Fi Trek, because we've got some exciting things going on this year. I had the opportunity to seek out our keynote speakers, and we did get Laura Chappell from Chapel U to present on Wednesday for the keynote, and she's one of the world's most known experts on protocol analysis in general, not just specifically to wireless. So she's going to bring some really good things to the event. And then we've got Stuart Chaffee on Thursday as the keynote. And if you don't know who Stuart Chaffee is, just go search for the Computer Chronicles on YouTube. You can watch many of the episodes from 1983 to 2002. And it was a PBS television channel broadcast. And it's really amazing. A lot of IT people that are famous in that historical window are interviewed on there and are part of the show in different ways. And if you're my age, getting close to 50 or in your 50s, then you'll be reliving history that you've lived. If you're young, you'll get to understand how we got to where we are. It's like a digital archive of the history of the computer revolution. Really amazing stuff. Well, Stuart was the host of the Computer Chronicles until 2002, and he's going to join us. He's 81 and still actively engaged in the tech community, and he's going to give us a lot of great information. I'm excited about him being there. So you can go to cwnp.com. Right on the main page, there's a link to the conference information and website, so make sure you check that out. Okay, so why would we have a lab in the first place? Why do we even want a lab? Why not just read the book and take the test? Well, first of all, let me say that some people could probably read the book, take the test, and pass the exam. But I don't recommend it. And there's a reason I don't recommend it, even if you could. The reason I don't recommend it is that experiential learning is what really develops expertise in something. So doing it develops expertise, right? There are things that you will learn that can't possibly be put in a book, really, by going through a lab. I mean, think about it. Let's think about something simple like installing and configuring Microsoft Office. So if I'm going to write a chapter in a book on installing and configuring Microsoft Office, what I'm going to have to do is limit myself to the most common tasks that you do when installing and configuring Microsoft Office. I can't go over every little detail of the options that might be available and the things that you might do. And the reason I can't is because there are too many. I would need a whole book just on installing and configuring Microsoft Office that would be 500 or 600 pages itself. So I've got to decide what I'm going to cover. And every author and every book has to do that. When you get in the lab, guess what? You get to play around with all those little details. That experiential learning takes you deeper than you can possibly go by just reading a book. And then, of course, working with different configurations so that you have the option to see maybe different types of Radius servers and different types of certificate servers, different types of APs in their configuration interfaces, and so forth. And then for those that maybe can't just read a book and memorize everything, knowledge retention is much better when you do the thing that you're learning about than when you just learn about it. And there's knowledge correction. I don't know about you, but there have been many times that I have gone through the process of learning something only to do it and find out I learned something wrong, either because I misunderstood it or it wasn't clear in the documentation I was looking at, or frankly, the documentation was just wrong. It happens. So knowledge correction when you actually do something happens quite a lot. And these are all good reasons to have a lab. You get the experience, you work with different configurations, you retain the knowledge better, and you even correct maybe errant thinking as you go through the process. So what's needed in a lab? Well, you don't have to have an NSA lab in order to do this. You're going to need APs. One can be sufficient to set it up. Security servers, protocol analyzers, and hacking tools. So these are the basic components you're going to need. And I'll talk to you about these different components and what your options are for acquiring them as we go along. So first of all, you need your lab access points. When it comes to access points, they really come into two categories that can be sufficient for a lab environment. The first, of course, is just enterprise APs. If you can get your hands on enterprise APs, then you're golden. You've got what you need to go through the process. Now, there are different ways to get them. Some AP vendors every now and then will run a webinar and they'll say, if you attend, we're going to send you a free AP. So watch out for those. You might be able to get one of those. I can see the requests coming in now. So let me just say, I don't know of any that are upcoming very, very soon. So you'll just have to watch the different vendors and their webinar announcements and see what might be happening, okay? But that does happen sometimes. Some will send samples on request. Now, more often than not, they want to send it because you're the Wi-Fi person in a company and you want to test a couple of their APs to see if you want to use them in your environment. So keep in mind that they don't normally send them to Tom so he can use it at home in order to build a lab. They also often offer low-cost versions. So, for example, Cisco has been known over the years to sell some APs for maybe anywhere from $200 to $400. And these APs can usually be purchased on Amazon and places like that. And they'll have most of the enterprise features built into them so that you can actually use them for a learning process. And of course, you can get them used on eBay, but always be careful. Pay attention to how the AP works, because the AP might be licensed for a window of time to a cloud account. And while, yes, you might be able to transfer it, you still have to pay for the license for the cloud account to use it. So make sure you pay attention to how that particular AP you're looking at would work, because you might think, wow, I'm getting 10 APs for $200 and I can set up a nice big lab. And then you get them and find out it's going to cost you a couple $1,000s just to get them up and running. So always verify how the APs are configured. Can they be configured standalone? Do they need a controller? If they do, can you also get one that will it have the proper licenses for it to actually work? All of that's something to be really cautious about when buying hardware used. Now, you can also go another route, and that's consumer APs, with custom firmware like DDR-WRT and OpenWRT. So basically what you're doing is you're buying a wireless router, a consumer wireless router from someone like Asus or Netgear or what have you. And then instead of upgrading the vendor's firmware, you're loading a custom firmware that the community has built for that. And both DDWRT and OpenWRT are basically Linux firmware options for these wireless routers. And they even allow you to add all kinds of services and extra features and capabilities. But just the default firmware has most of the enterprise features you'd want to work with in a lab. And some of them you can even get up and running a radius server on the actual wireless router itself. Some of these wireless routers are like little computers. They're pretty powerful, multi-gigahertz processors, quite a bit of memory. And so you can actually run a radius server right inside of the wireless router if you want to. So this is definitely an option, and it's a way to take a consumer grade device and make it appear more like an enterprise device and give you a lot of extra features and capabilities. I did do a setup one time myself where I had a couple of Nighthawk wireless routers, and one of them was configured with the wireless disabled, and I literally just used it as my services appliance. I put my radius server in there, I put my user management in there and so forth by adding extra add-ons to WRT. And then the other one was configured with WRT to actually act as the access point, or wireless router, but access point. And so you can use that to build out a lab very low cost. So that's certainly an option. Of course, buy your wireless router on eBay, get it used. You don't have to have the latest and greatest when it comes to testing security, right? So with security, we're focused on security, not necessarily 802.11ac, 4-stream, or anything like that. It doesn't matter, honestly, if it's an 802.11n access point, because we're focused on security. And so as long as the firmware supports the security you want to work with, you've got what you need. And that's the big key. So verify it supports what you need. Now, the next thing then is your security servers. So these are the different servers that are going to provide the services you need. As I just mentioned, you could do it inside of your OpenWRT or DDWRT wireless router if you wanted to. But basically what we're looking at here is the ability to get certificate services up and running. If you want to work with EAP TLS, for example, so that you can have certificates for the clients as well as for the radius server, you're going to need a radius server. That's what does the actual authentication. So the certificate services server provides certificates used in authentication. The radius server actually does the authentication with the certificates. You will need user databases. DNS servers are usually needed, DHCP for the clients. You might want Active Directory to take care of kind of everything for you. So these are your security servers. So how do you get them? Well, there are a lot of different options. For example, there's a pre-built virtual machine you can get called Radius Desk, which is basically an all-in-one radius server based on FreeRadius that gives you that. You can get different versions of Linux and then manually set them up with FreeRadius. If you really want to go through the nitty-gritty detail process, that's the way to go. So set up your own Linux machine. You can do it in a virtual machine. Set up your own Linux machine and go through the process of manually getting FreeRadius up and running, getting certificate servers up and running, all of that. If you do it on Linux, and you don't have some wizard that does it for you in a GUI, believe me, you are learning how this stuff is configured. It's not like the GUI interfaces in Windows. But if you're more focused on just, okay, I want to understand how wireless uses these things, then a trial version of Windows Server might be a better way to go. So you can download a trial version of Windows Server 2019, for example, and it's good for 6 months, 180 days to be specific, but I just say 6 months to be simple. And with that, you can set up everything we see here. Active Directory, which will give you your user database, DNS, DHCP, radius servers, certificate services, all of it can be set up with Windows Server. In fact, let me show you an example of that. So here we're looking at Windows Server 2019. And I don't have everything set up on here. I just wanted you to see the basic thing that it gives you. So this is a 180-day trial version of Windows Server running in VMware Workstation in this case, but you can run it in the free VMware Player. Works fine. You could also use Hyper-V. I'm just more of a VMware Workstation person myself. And you can see right down here in the lower right, it might be hard to see at this screen resolution, but it tells you it's a Windows Server 2019 Standard Edition evaluation, valid for 180 days. So this is the trial version. I literally just set this up really quickly this morning early so that I could just show it to you and let you actually see it. And so one of the things you'll notice, I do have DNS on here because it's needed by Active Directory, and I have Active Directory domain services here. So all of that is up and running, which means I can go to Tools, for example, and I can go to Active Directory Users and Computers, which is considered to be deprecated now, but you can still come in here and you can see the users, and I could go in here and set up user accounts if I wanted to and use them for authentication purposes with a Radius server. I say that's now considered deprecated because they really want you to use the Active Directory Administrative Center, which is this tool here. I like users and computers sometimes because it loads a whole lot faster, but you can see that I can go into my domain and then here are my users, and I can still reset passwords for users, add new users, do all of that kind of thing. So right over here, I can say new and then user and so forth. If you're not familiar with Windows Server in general, you haven't done a lot of work with it, it can be a bit overwhelming getting everything up and running. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be doing a demonstration video. It's just going to be put on CWNP TV, and I've actually recorded it, but I need to get it edited and posted. And so watch the CWNP TV YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to it, go do that, and then you'll get notified when it's posted. But it's a video of getting the trial version of Windows Server 2019 up and running with Active Directory, DNS, all that stuff working so that you can then do the other stuff in your lab. And then it's not a bad idea to save that virtual machine and then load instances of it to play with. Keep in mind though that you only have 6 months to be able to use it, and then it's going to stop working for you. Okay, so I have Active Directory up and running on this particular virtual machine, but you'll see that I can add other roles and features. And so if I did want to do the whole thing here, and I could run a separate virtual machine, by the way, that runs Windows Server, joins to this, and then on that separate virtual machine, I actually install my Radius server, my certificate services, and so forth. But you can't put it all on the same machine if you want. Just know that that's not what you want to do in a real world, but in a lab, you can get by with it. So if I click Next and select the only server I have, the current server, then you can see right here is Active Directory Certificate Services. So that's what I need to issue certificates for the Radius server if I'm using PEEP, for the servers and clients if I'm using EAP, TLS, and so forth. So this is the certificate server. Again, a lot of detail about that. I'll be doing videos later on in the summer demonstrating that particular process. So we'll get those on the CWNP TV YouTube channel as well. So you can see how to set up certificate services. There'll be one for that. And then there'll be one for the network policy and access server, which is the thing that provides Radius. So it can do other things too, but this is the thing that gives you Radius. So if I select it and say add feature and click next, and then click next again, you'll notice it says you can deploy NPS as a remote authentication dial-in user service or Radius server and proxy. After installing NPS using this wizard, you can configure it from the NPAS homepage using the NPS console. Now, it takes some time to install and get up and running, so today I'm not actually going to do that installation, but I just love to point this out because it's not called Radius. So there's nothing in Windows Server called Radius that you install. You install NPAS, or the Network Policy and Access Services, which includes NPS, the Network Policy Server, which can be a Radius server. Okay, so it's a little bit confusing inside of Windows Server how all these things work together. So again, sometime next week, I'll have the one edited showing you how to set it up as an Active Directory server with DNS. And then later on in the summer, you will see setting up certificate services, and then you will see setting up NPS or Radius. And by the end, you'll see how to use the trial version of Windows to literally set up an entire infrastructure for a lab environment to work with it. So if you subscribe to the CWNP TV YouTube channel, you'll be notified as those post. We'll also, of course, tweet about it and so forth to remind people as well. Okay, so that's Windows Server. And that can really give you all of these things we're talking about here. You can get your certificate services, your Radius servers, user databases, DNS, DHCP, Active Directory. It's all right there in your server. And one instance can do it all in a lab environment. Again, in a production environment, I'd want to distribute this across multiple servers in most cases, or multiple virtual machines if I'm in a virtualized environment. Now, what next you need? Well, you need protocol analyzers. So part of learning about security is looking at the communications, right? Now, on the wired side, you can use Wireshark for sure. I just said Wired Shark. On the wired side, you can use Wireshark for sure. The name says a lot, right? Wireshark. It's going to go out and gobble up packets off the wire. Well, originally, it was really an Ethernet capture tool, right? And so the name kind of has a legacy element there. But with certain adapters, you can capture wireless stuff with Wireshark on Windows, but it only works with old versions of the protocol, and it's just not the best on Windows to capture wireless things. On Mac, it's great. Okay, so if you got a MacBook, load up Wireshark, you can capture your wireless frames easily. If you want wireless specific on Windows, then Microsoft does have the Microsoft Message Analyzer, which with the right adapter and so forth can capture wireless frames. So there is a way to do that. That's not in my slide here, but it's called the Microsoft Message Analyzer. So look into that. You can get some information that way. But there are also commercial products like ComView for Wi-Fi, OmniPeak, and AirMagnet, which will capture these as well. The key thing here, and you can get trial versions of some of these, the key thing here is that you want to be able to look at the frame exchanges related to security. You want to look at the authentication information. You want to look at the information in beacon frames that specifies what kind of security is available on the network. A great way to really learn about all the nitty-gritty details of security. Now, do keep in mind there's wired side stuff here too, right? So if you're doing Radius and you want to see the Radius exchanges between the AP and the Radius server, then you're going to want to do wired side capture to take a look at that. If you want to see exchanges between the Radius server and the directory service like Active Directory or some other user database, you're probably going to be on the wired side for that too. So there could be some wired side analysis and wireless side analysis. Finally, you want hacking tools. So you want to understand penetration testing, and you understand it best by actually doing the different tasks. And so the tools you're going to need are things like AirCrackNG, which runs on Linux, Kismet, which runs on Linux, Kali Linux, which is Linux. So you're kind of getting a picture here. Yeah, I can do some cracking, some penetration testing with Windows, but when it comes to wireless pen testing, Linux is the platform of choice. It's just that simple. There's also hardware. You can get hardware devices like HackRF and things like that that can be used for some penetration testing as well. But pretty much anything you'd ever want to do, you can accomplish with Linux. And Kali Linux really just comes out of the box with most of what you need there already. So let me show that to you. So here at the same time, I have Kali Linux running in another virtual machine. And I'll just connect to that. And so you can see that it's a distribution of Linux, and you get your shell that you can go to with your typical shell commands. Now, I always cheat in the lab. First thing I do when I go to the shell is sudo bash. And now everything I run is running as root. Rather than having to say sudo before every command. I don't recommend it in the real world, but in the lab, once you do this, you can do all of your updates. You can do everything you want to do without having to worry about whether you need to sudo the command or not. Now, if you don't know what sudo is, well, I'd suggest you watch some elementary tutorials on YouTube. So, go to YouTube, look for tutorials on like the basics of Linux administration, things like that, and learn a little bit about it. And you'll understand why sudo is a part of the process. I'm just going to exit out of here. And here's the thing. When you go to applications in Kali Linux under wireless attacks, you've got all kinds of tools that are available to you for wireless. So Aircrack NG can be launched from here. Chirp, which is used to work with different types of RF radio modules that you can get. Cowpaddy for cracking WPA. Fern Wi-Fi cracker and Wi-Fi down here at the bottom both give you kind of a GUI to do your crack attempts against WPA, WPA2. Ghost Fisher, which is a GUI interface that lets you pull up a wireless adapter. I don't have a USB adapter plugged in, but if you have a virtual machine like this, you plug in a Linux supported USB adapter and pass it to the virtual machine instead of the local computer, and it'll just show up in here. You pick the adapter, and then you can actually set up a fake AP. You can set up a fake DNS server, DHCP. You can even set up a fake HTTP server. So you can just pick some website on the internet and say you want to clone it, or you can build your own fake web page. The point of this Fisher is you're trying to get people to connect to your fake AP, go to your fake portal, and enter their credential, right? So once you have their credentials, you can then go ahead and use their credentials to access the real network. So this is one of the common attack methods that hackers might use, and it's a tool that you can use to see if users may be vulnerable to that in an environment. We have also GIS, Kismet, and Kismet, one with the GPS support, one just for local wireless capture. So Kismet is like a Wi-Fi scanner with a lot of extra power and capabilities. So you'll want to be taking a look at that. We have MDK3, MFOC, which is for working with very specific type of wireless chips. MF term for the same types of chips. Then we have Pixie, WPS, and Reaver. Both of these are used to try to crack WPS. So that's your push button type of security that's often used in consumer devices, things like that. And then if you do expand wireless attacks, you can see they group them into wireless tools, and you can see there are actually others on here as well. So you have a Sleep for attacking Leap, Bully, EAP MD5, Wi-Fi ARP, Wi-Fi DNS, Wi-Fi Honey, Wi-Fi Ping, Wi-Fi Tap, several other tools that weren't listed in the other one. But you also have Bluetooth tools, tools for Zigbee, like the sniffer for Zigbee communications, RFID and near field communications tools, and even, again, Chirp for working with your various radios that you might get that you want to do some custom communications with or something like that. So all of this is just built right in to Kali Linux, giving you everything that you need to do your penetration testing and to practice these processes. So very, very useful. And then at the same time, keep in mind it's everything else too. So everything about penetration testing, information gathering, vulnerability analysis, web app analysis, database assessment, password attacks, reverse engineering, all the rest of the stuff that you might do. It's just included right here in Kali Linux out of the box. And you can actually download a pre-built virtual machine, so you don't have to actually install it in a VM yourself and get it up and running. Offensive Security makes them available. So if you do a search for Offensive Security Kali Linux download, you can download a pre-built VirtualBox or VMware virtual machine that you can then run ready to roll and start using it. Just remember, to do the Wi-Fi stuff, you need a Wi-Fi adapter. So you need one that's compatible with Kali Linux. And if you do a search for Kali Linux compatible Wi-Fi adapters, there are wikis out there with lists of all kinds of them you can get. And then you can use those to do your penetration testing in the lab environment. So great thing to use and know about. Okay, so remember the 4 things that you need: APs, and then you need your security servers, and then you need your protocol analyzers, and finally you need your hacking tools. So these are the 4 components that are going to bring your lab together so that you can actually work with security in wireless. Again, I want to remind you to watch for the ad hoc videos coming to CWNP TV throughout the summer that are going to go in depth in the actual demo of these processes. It's just going to launch. I'll start at the beginning of the video saying, in this video, we're going to demonstrate setting up Windows Server 2019 with Active Directory so that you have a foundation for building your security services needed for a wireless security lab. And then we'll jump right into doing the actual process. And then later there'll be a video that says, in this video, we're going to set up certificate services and see how we can get everything up and running so that we can issue certificates both for a Radius server and client devices. Okay, I'm kind of in recording mode for an e-learning video, but you get the point. So we'll have those videos. They will post throughout the summer, and you'll want to make sure that you catch those later on. All right, that's all we have scheduled to talk about today. So I'd like to thank you for attending.